I've been in the room when people have died so many times. There's a real shift in energy when the soul leaves the body.
Yes. The work you're doing is very sacred. How do you hold space for that in that moment?
When my patients, their families, or my colleagues are afraid to bring these things up with people, I try to reframe it as an act of deep love and respect. Embedded within each love is loss. It's the sharp side of loving somebody. And when somebody can tell you, this is what I hope for from you when I get sick, that is such an intimate conversation that it is rooted in deep love.
I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring Real Love Ready. Whatever brought you here today, whether it's love, loss, or you're just trying to understand yourself better, I want you to know you don't have to figure it out alone. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online on your schedule. Check them out at betterhelp.com/loveready for 10% off. That's BetterHelp.com/loveready. I am really looking forward to this conversation that I'm going to be having with Dr. Sunita Puri. She is a palliative care physician and someone who I've learned a lot from recently. I listened to her book, That Good Night, and she shares a lot of stories of her experience really midwifing people through the last days, months, years of their lives. When I think about this series, about how we learn to love, how we heal, how we find our way back, there's one question that keeps pulling me deeper. What does love look like when everything else has been stripped away? When there is no more time to perform it, or delay it, or get it right later? My guest today has spent her career witnessing these questions unfold. Dr. Sunita Puri is a physician, a writer, and an associate professor of medicine at UC Irvine, where she directs the inpatient palliative care service. She's a graduate of Yale, a Rhodes Scholar, and the author of That Good Night, Life and Medicine in the 11th Hour. Her writing appears in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, and The New York Times. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I believe that we can all learn so much about love through death. I'm so happy you're here, Dr. Sunita Puri.
I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you. We can't talk about love without talking about, life. And death is such a big part of life.
Yes.
But I don't think we're talking enough about it.
No.
So today we're having that opportunity with you, with somebody who spends day in, day out, really working with people at the end of their lives. So I feel very blessed and very grateful to have you with me today. This is a very important conversation. I read your book, That Good Night. It's a book that I will be coming back to and passing on. I know that the work you're doing is so important. So I value your time and I'm so grateful that you're spending it with me today.
Well, thank you for having me and thank you for the work you do promoting conversations about what love really looks like and what it is. Because I think there's a lot of fantasies, obviously, about what love and a good relationship looks like. And there's a lot of fantasies about what end of life looks like and what living well up until the point where we take our last breath looks like. So I think these topics intersect in a really important way.
Yes, they sure do. So let's just dive right into death. So why do you think so many people are scared of death?
I think that's a really important question that cuts at kind of our fears, or just fears of the unknown and our fears of things that we can't control. And I think in our kind of Western culture, generally speaking, there is this idea that we have autonomy and agency and a plethora of choices. And this idea that you can make the life you want gets extended into you can make the death you want. You can stave off the death you don't want. you can pick and choose what that's going to look like for you. And so I think the illusion of control that we live with makes it even scarier for people to face something that is unknowable. And it's not just dying and death that's unknowable, it's the time between getting a hard diagnosis and actually dying. That interval is something we don't know how to face because we don't know what it's going to be like. And I think the uncertainty is what is the hardest part. That's the hardest part of illness, I think, for my patients and their families is, we didn't choose to be here. And now we have no choice in some ways in what's going to unfold, or we think we don't have that. So how are we going to live alongside the many types of suffering that come with being sick? When we don't have a relationship with suffering and lack of control during life, it makes what happens when we get sick, even if we're not terminally ill, but when we get sick, it makes that much harder to navigate.
Oh, definitely. When we are not living our lives before having a diagnosis, understanding that there's so much in life we can't control.
Exactly.
And we don't have a relationship with what it means, like with suffering. We don't want to suffer. We do everything in our lives to not suffer.
Exactly. Then
it makes that period a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And what I get to do in palliative care, which is a term I think some people just might not know the definition
Yes,
of.
please tell us. What does palliative care mean?
Yeah. So it is really an engagement with suffering. It's when I describe it to my patients, because it's a scary term. And when people hear an unfamiliar term and it has many syllables and is, kind of a hard word to pronounce, people get nervous. And so I just describe myself as a doctor who is going to help with their quality of life because they're sick. And I do that in two ways. I help manage these different types of suffering that we go through, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual suffering. And I also talk with them about who they are, what matters to them, what they envision their life to look like from this point on. And I just support them as it unfolds.
Wow.
And so kind of in kitchen table language, just saying, I'm here to accompany you.
Wow.
In whatever way that your body and your spirit needs it.
That is amazing, to have a doctor come in and say that to a patient. That's incredible.
I think we don't know how to translate our purpose in medicine. And I think that's where people no longer know what to expect. And just the act of needing to go and get healthcare has become a particularly nerve-wracking experience because the system doesn't necessarily allow for accompaniment. The system allows for number of patients seen means you're doing your job well.
Right.
But in ancient times, like Hippocrates, who's considered the father of medicine, he really kind of emphasized that our job is to cure sometimes, but to care always. Wow. And to me, that translates into I'm going to be there even when I can't fix the problem.
Right.
Or what we think is the main problem.
And as a palliative care physician, you're not going in there with the objective of cure. Right?
Usually not.
It's care.
It's care.
And accompaniment. Wow.
And helping people to see themselves and their situation with honesty. And that, I think, involves taking away the illusion that everything can be fixed.
Right.
And so when I start from there, what I'm trying to do is come from a place of honesty and transparency, because I think that's where we can begin our most genuine confrontations with mortality.
Yeah. Wow. Honesty. And a lot of people don't want to go there. But
no. And sometimes they never get there. And that's also, I think, part of dying honestly is knowing that sometimes this ideal that we put out there about reconciling with everyone we love, dying completely painlessly, having no regrets, passing on our wisdom. These are also kind of fantasies that people hold themselves to in all sorts of different ways. And then when they're actually faced with what it looks like for them and their journey, it may not fit that idealized vision.
Wow.
And so sometimes dying honestly also just means saying that vision is not my life. And that's also okay.
Wow. So your mother prayed with patients before they went into surgery. What did it mean to use a child to watch medicine and faith sitting side by side like that?
So yeah,
I think that's quite unique.
It is. I was very lucky to kind of see that because both my parents grew up really in horrible poverty in post-independence India. And so for them and their parents, faith was extremely strong. It was like the bedrock for them because they had nothing else to really hold on to in the physical and the material world. All of that was just like passing through it was just going through their fingers like sand.
Yeah.
And so for them, faith and the belief that something bigger is helping us through these miseries was really important. And so my mom didn't lose that when she became a doctor. And I think sometimes we're taught there's this binary between science and medicine and faith and everything that we can't prove. But for her, those really sat side by side. And my dad's an engineer, but same thing, right?
Very faithful.
Very faithful and very humble about knowing that the way they made their lives was not them alone.
Right.
And so she would tell me these stories about asking patients, do you want to pray before we go into the operating room? And she's an anesthesiologist, so she's really kind of taking people to the brink of death and getting them through something that's hopefully going to help them live a better life. But it's frightening. It's so scary to put your life in the hands of a person you've never met before, because that's what anesthesia is.
You have to, the way you phrase that, it's like you're putting your faith
Yes,
in the doctor's
exactly.
hands. And I think people do that
Yes,
very
they do.
almost willingly and like readily. It's like, you are the person, you're the cure.
Yes.
I'm putting my faith in you.
Exactly.
So, wow. And I've never really thought of it that way. Of course, your mom is an anesthesiologist. So it's like, okay, I'm putting you in my hands. Like you're putting me to sleep and whatever else is going to happen here, making sure I'm going to make it through.
And you might have met your surgeon before or your oncologist before, but anesthesia comes in really with no real relationship to you, which as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking a lot of times in palliative care, we come in towards the end with no real relationship to the person we're taking care of. So you have to earn trust like that. I think to myself, I have about a minute to get somebody to believe that I'm on their side.
1 minute?
That's what I think. I have about a minute because people are frightened. They are meeting 1,000 different people, residents, fellows, nurses, social workers, attendings. There's just this whole cast of character. And then you come in with like a scary sounding specialty. Oftentimes the teams have not told the patients that we are coming or explained our purpose.
Right.
So I think I give myself about a minute. That's kind of, I have to go in and with my heart and my head together, I have to help people understand I'm here to make this less scary, just like my mom had to. And so for her, offering the option of prayer backfired very few times, shockingly, in our country, which is generally, again, pits religion against science and reason. But she was able to do it. And a lot of patients were very grateful to just have that moment. And if they didn't have a religious practice, that was okay too.
Oh, yes.
And so, but it was just kind of saying like, I can take you through this in multiple ways.
Yeah.
By even asking the question.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what their faith was. Whatever it was, whatever prayers they said, my mom just bowed her head and supported them.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen a lot.
No.
And so, and then the surgeons got to know her practice too. And sometimes in surgeries, when things were not going well, they'd say, Rita, where's your Swami? And my mom would be like, he's here.
Yeah.
He's
And
watching over all this.
and Swami, is Swami another word for God? Where's your God? Or
Yeah, kind of like, where is your God?
Right.
And so it got almost kind of humorous for them.
It's like, you're going to bring him in. So
exactly, right? And she was like, well, I told you guys he's been here the whole time. So,
wow.
But
I think that's beautiful that your mom passed that down to you. I mean, bringing your heart into medicine. Because that, like you said, if you only have 1 minute, you know what you're bringing? You're bringing your heart.
You have to bring your vulnerabilities and your humanness without showing it directly, but just by kind of trying to ground everybody in a chaotic situation.
Oh, yeah.
And so what you carry into any encounter with a patient, I think, is the totality of who you are. But that's trained out of us. And so what it means, how we bring the best parts of ourselves forward that can make somebody feel safe and comfortable, that's not something we are taught.
It's not something you're trained. So when you say, I want to go there, like how is it as a physician, as a doctor, your totality is trained out of you? Is it like you are taught to distance, take your
Very
emotion
much
out,
so.
whatever you can do to take yourself out, like you're taught that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Because, and they don't come right out and say it, but you learn it. It's almost like a process of socializing where you're indoctrinated into a culture that isn't going to come right out and say, here are our rules, but you pick it up over time.
Oh, yeah.
You pick it up in how the attendings you're working with talk to patients. You're picking it up in how your fellow residents or med students are changing. And so for me, I experienced it very much as like, almost if you demonstrated caring too much, that was seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
And you would get told things like, well, you're going to burn out really quickly if you care this much. And I think those statements came from like well-intentioned people, but it just it leaves a very powerful impression because it's just as much about what you learn to do as what you start to leave behind.
So do you remember a specific moment in your life when you decided, I want to become a healer, I want to be a doctor? Like how did that,
great question.
Yeah, when did that come up for you?
So I think, to be honest, I think it was always an expectation that I would become a doctor.
Okay,
because, my parents, they wanted for my brother and I security in a new country. And so being a physician was seen as like a sacred thing, but also as a thing of security, that you'll always have job security. You'll be able to support yourself. My dad always emphasized to me, I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. And so it was always expected, and I resisted it for a long time because I wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
That was always in
and
me.
And you are a writer.
Yeah. And I didn't, but for me, I was like, well, there was a little bit of begrudging. I went to med school a little begrudgingly. I wanted to be just like my mom. And I think every time I saw how much she was respected at work, or when I would like go see patients with her in the post-anesthesia care unit, which would be absolutely not allowed today, but was somehow allowed. And
but it was your home, right? You talk about that in your book on how you were like hanging out with the nurses and the doctors like as a kid.
And the surgeons would babysit my brother and I in the surgical lounge when we were really just allowed to eat their ice cream sandwiches and drink their Coke.
Yeah.
They ate terribly. I was like, how are you going into a surgery like hopped up on sugar? But I guess it's better than being hopped up on other things.
Yeah.
So that's like where I grew up, absolutely. And so it was very familiar to me. And then when I actually started the schooling, though, it became somewhat unfamiliar because you go in with certain ideals of being loving and caring towards others, but then the system doesn't really fully allow for it. And that's actually, I think, part of why palliative care exists. It exists to correct medicine's blind spots and mistakes, where we don't have the space or the acculturation to really sit with suffering.
Right.
We're built and trained to diagnose a problem and fix it. And that is enormously important. And I am such a nerd that to me, if I'm presented with a tough case, I love the intellectual challenge of going down the way I was taught to think and thinking broadly about what is wrong with this person's body and how can I fix it. But it's equally important to make sure you remember who's living in that body. That's the piece of it that gets blurry when we're trying to master all that necessary material.
Right. You're looking at, the totality of the patient and their life. That's very different than just like looking at the body and the numbers.
Mechanistically. And I think, we get to really get into like how to treat pain well. I didn't leave my residency knowing how to treat pain well. And when I work with the residents, a lot of them have no idea how to treat pain.
Right.
So we weren't taught those basic things that are the focus of palliative care. And we definitely were not taught how to break bad news, how to talk people through it, how to help them understand in kitchen table language what was actually happening to their body,
right,
or to ask what they hope for. It was really not a part of our curriculum. So palliative care, that's our territory. So we kind of exist in partnership with a new type of medicine that is really more focused mechanistically on what's wrong with the body and how can we fix it.
Wow, I love that. You became a palliative care physician. And so a lot of this was just unfolding and unlearning as you were going with your patients. Is that really how, and now you're associate professor, so you're teaching other doctors how to
do this.
These soft skills that are so integral to your job.
Exactly.
Right?
And in fellowship, so when I finished residency and I started palliative care training, that's where a lot of the unlearning had to happen. How do I not know how to treat pain? Or I treat pain using this formula. Then you have to kind of take that formulaic approach away and actually understand what's happening to the person before you. And especially when it came to talking to people about hard things, I had to unlearn all those habits of asking formulaic questions and not knowing how to navigate the answers to those questions, of not knowing what to ask, or someone saying something. Like one of the biggest examples I can give you is people kind of feeling like they want everything, quote unquote, done for them. And when you're a resident and you don't know how to really navigate what they're actually asking for or what they're hoping for, what they're scared of, then you just say, okay, well then I'm going to do CPR. I'm going to put you on a ventilator. That's what doing everything is. But then in fellowship, I learned to say, okay, my impulse is to just do everything. But now I have to actually take a step back and ask them, tell me what you're hoping for when you say you want everything done. When you say want everything done, tell me what you're imagining that is. And what if we do everything, but your father is still dying?
Right.
And it really meant slowing down and not taking what people were saying at face value and doing the mining beneath the sentences. Because there's always something motivating that. These kind of lines of, I'm a fighter, I'm waiting for a miracle to happen, just do everything, he wants everything. We're all reading from a script. This cultural script or this language is relied upon so commonly because we don't have better language to actually express what we're afraid of. We're not given the space to do that. We're not really asked, tell me what you're hoping for. Or if this is the choice you're making, let's talk about what it will mean to endure that choice.
Right.
And those are the sorts of things that, again, in a one-year palliative care fellowship, you don't learn it all, but you have a foundation to go forward with that is very different from what you leave residency with. So it was a peeling back and an examining of everything I had taken at face value that I knew wasn't working. Because I would sit in these discussions and say, I think CPR would cause a tremendous amount of suffering, but I have no way to explain that to this person. So I'm just going to do what they say. And that's not the relational role that you want to have with a patient. But I had to unpeel back. I had to go back to all the assumptions underlying the things I was doing, be honest with myself about why this wasn't working, and look to my mentors who were wonderful. I was really blessed in fellowship with truly outstanding teachers. Mm-hmm. And they pushed me to say, after every meeting, why did you say that? Why did you offer this? What were you hoping the patient was going to say? And to do things differently and more honestly.
It takes experience.
A lot of, as I'm sure in your work as well, right? Helping people navigate love and the complexity of relationships. You didn't wake up one day and were suddenly able to do it. Some of it's trial and error.
Yeah. Oh, of course it is. Yeah, that's life, right?
Exactly, yes.
One of the things that there was a theme, of course, there's a lot of themes in this, right? When somebody's dying and they're going through this process, and then the family members, I mean, the stories that you share in your book, Sunita, they're powerful because it's like we can see our experience or have heard of people going through this. And it seems like there's two sides of the spectrum. Are you going to fight through this or are you going to give up?
Yes.
And it's like, where's the in between? There's things people say that are so common.
Very common.
When they're going through something like this or their family members are going through it. How do you navigate that, right?
Yeah.
It's so much about communication and how you're helping people reframe.
Yep.
Fighting through this when you have only, maybe a month to live may not be the best course.
Exactly.
Right? And that's okay. We're going to fight through this. Well, do you have to fight through it?
Or do you fight for different things, right? Because I think this binary you're pointing out of fighting or giving up, surviving or losing, right? These are really militaristic terms around something that is an embodied experience. And being a warrior is something that puts a lot of pressure on a lot of my patients.
Oh, yes.
So and I think this idea of what we're performing or enacting versus what we really feel and want, it's kind of amazing to watch. And I can give you an example, a pretty recent example of a man who was dying of cancer, and he was, in his 30s. And I see a lot of people now in their 30s and 40s and 50s dying of really awful cancers. And that's not something I saw when I finished my training like 12 years ago. And I think especially when people are younger, there's a lot of pressure to fight.
Yes.
Because there's this idea that you have so much left to live for. But I think in his case, everyone around him, his oncologists, the nurses, his family, like there wasn't even a consideration of hospice or of comfort.
Right. They were like, you have to fight through this. You've got a life to,
And in these meetings where we would talk these things through with his cancer team present and his family and him, he privately would tell me of the pressure he felt to be a fighter because he didn't want his family to think he was just letting them down or that they weren't worth fighting for.
Wow.
And so in the one-on-one, when we could really be honest, that's when I got to see what he was most scared of and that was motivating some of these decisions he was making. And so I validated that. I was like, of course, but also this doesn't need to be a performance because this is your life.
This is your life.
And the people who love you ultimately want what's best for you. And what's best, quote unquote, is not always clear. And there's not always one way to do what's best because your circumstances are going to change. What's best right now might be different later. But what would it feel like for you if we talked with your wife about what's going on for you? Like our team can be there to support you, or you can give it a try and see how it goes. But your fear is getting in the way of something really important here, which is your honesty. And it's remarkable in those moments to see what shifts when you just name it.
Yes.
And give people permission to be with their fear of letting other people down, but also their fear of going through things that they are going to bear. that they don't know that they want to bear. And so that's where I think the active accompaniment and being present with someone and let them be human, let them be confused, let them rage, let them even be somewhat relieved over hearing that the end is coming.
Yeah.
Because there can be relief in that too. There can be freedom in knowing that the battle's going to be over. And so there's this range of things that opens up when we stop performing for each other.
Yeah. We were just talking about performing like earlier. And it's something that we do.
Yes.
We really do. And what you just said rang something, it was like this aha moment around like, just really being able to speak honestly about our fears.
Yes.
Not necessarily just at the end of, we're talking about the end of life right now, but at any time.
At any time.
Right? That is such a connection point. Being able to say, look, listen, I'm scared too. And then being able to be so honest. This is hard stuff, but
it's so hard.
There's a lot of skill involved. And you're accompanying people in that. You're teaching people that. That's beautiful.
And sometimes people don't even know what's going on for them.
Yeah.
Right? And so that too is a place that we start from. And knowing that everything is going to change, it changes the law of life and it's the law of death. And so where you are right now and what you're thinking you're afraid of and what you're withholding or what you're offering, that's going to evolve. So they don't have to remain in the stuck place of fighting and choosing chemo just because it's being offered.
Right. Let's take a quick break. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Something I've heard over and over again, both in my own life and in the conversations we've had on this show, is that asking for help can feel like admitting defeat. Like somehow if you need support, it means something's wrong with you. I just want to push back on that because I don't believe in that for 1 second. I'm actually somebody that is an advocate for asking for help. Going to therapy does not mean that you're falling apart. It means that you're paying attention. It means you care enough about yourself and the people you love to actually show up for that process. BetterHelp is online therapy that makes it genuinely simple to get started. You get matched with a licensed therapist based on what you're working through, and you can meet with them by phone, on video, or even through messaging, on your own schedule, wherever you are. If you've been curious about therapy, now is a good time. Visit betterhelp.com/loveready to get 10% off. That's BetterHelp.com/loveready. So you are often the one delivering the news of someone's terminal diagnosis, which is very sacred. The work you're doing is very sacred. You know, I think of, how do you hold space for that in that moment? Like, are you praying? What is your experience when you're able to have that conversation with somebody to tell them this news?
That is such a great question. And I'm glad that you're asking it because sometimes my days become one such situation after another without actually being able to reflect. And so when I go in, number one, I never really know what I'm walking into. And I think there's this illusion in medicine that we've got this, like we know what we're walking into. But even when you take someone to the operating room and you open them up and you think you know what the problem is, the scan may not show everything. So all of the work that we've spent getting to know somebody or their family, if we've had the luxury of getting to know them along the way before we have to deliver something hard, you still never really know the dynamic you're walking into. So the first thing I do ask God, just help me to do this well. If I know it's going to be a tense, potentially confrontational discussion, then I just ask, like, please just speak through me. Just let me be the instrument. Almost like keep me out of this and you just do this.
Right.
And I'll be along for the ride.
Yes.
But that is what I do. And I often have students, residents, like there's a bunch of other people there watching. And so I also really try to tell myself, this is not about them.
No.
This is about you and the patient and the other doctors who are there to share whatever news they have to share. So when I'm in that moment, I think there's a lot of preparation of what is the one, maybe two big messages I want them to hear. And how am I going to explain it in the fewest words possible? Because I think, unfortunately, what we do when we're not prepared is we keep talking.
Right.
And in medicine, again, something I had to unlearn was going in there and saying, this is what's going on in these painstaking explanations that often were filled with jargon that nobody understood.
No, just confusion, because you're not going to hear any of those words. You're just going to hear like, you're dying or whatever, and then that's it.
And then you say one thing like that someone can anchor onto, like, this is all bad, but your kidney function is better today. What are people going to anchor on? They're going to anchor on that. But it's about going through the facts and explaining the significance of those facts. What does it mean that you need more and more life support? That means your body can do less and less for itself. And so I have to come in with a couple messages I want them to hear. And when I say the news, I have to lead up to it. It's like when you write a piece, you want to lead the reader to the hard place. You can't just come right out and say it. You're like, who is this narrator saying any of this? You have to trust the narrator in order to actually be convinced by a piece. So it's the same principle that, again, I have to earn trust quickly. I will often open conversations by acknowledging their suffering. Yes. And that's not something I was doing, except in the past year and a half. But just kind of saying, okay, guys, I just want you to know I'm so sorry for how you have been suffering. Because it is really hard to witness somebody sick when you can't fix it.
Yeah.
And I just open like that now, and because I genuinely believe we don't ever honor that in medicine because we're so used to seeing people suffering.
That you're not honoring the suffering. You talk about this in your book about when you were growing up and your dad would take you to, for instance, a nursing home or to see like some of the elders, like Indians that had moved here, that immigrated, and they were like dying in a nursing home, like that one gentleman.
Yes.
He didn't have family or friends that were, and your dad would be like, here we go, Sunita, we're going to see him.
We're going to go
and you'd
see
be
him.
like begrudging, oh gosh, Dad, not again.
Yeah.
And you would say like, why, what are we doing here? And he would say, we have to be with him in his suffering.
Yeah.
Life is full of suffering.
Exactly.
And it's like, get used to it. And we have to know as human beings that there is a lot of suffering in life. And we need to be there for people in their suffering. Like your dad taught you that.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. But also like, wow, we want to be fixing the suffering.
Yes.
We don't want to talk about it. We want to take the pill or drink the booze or whatever. like we don't want to have our hard emotions.
No.
It is like physical, emotional, spiritual, all the things that you're saying.
Things. It totally is. And like,
so acknowledging the suffering.
And when you do it, again, like the power of just naming what you observe, even if you're wrong, right? Like sometimes I have been wrong a number of times where I'm like, it seems like there's a lot of tension in the room. And the family will be like, no, we're fine.
There's no tension.
And I was like, okay, clearly I'm bringing something to this. That's my own thing. Yeah. But so sometimes you're wrong, but at least taking a chance and naming an emotion or acknowledging something sets a different tone for the discussion. And then in order to say it, I hope that I have set the atmosphere that we are coming to this from a place of deep care. And that sometimes it's very hard to tell people what is actually happening. But I say it usually in a couple sentences, and I'm very careful about making sure there's no jargon in there. So instead of saying, he's in multi-system organ failure and there's not much we can do to fix things, I instead say something along the lines of, he needs the most extreme forms of life support for his heart, his kidneys, and his lungs. He's needed more help from us rather than less. Mm-hmm. His body is showing us that it's reaching its limits and he's dying.
Right.
And that's a very different tenor than he's in multi-system organ failure, which is how doctors talk to each other. Mm-hmm. But it's not like that doesn't mean anything to someone who's scared, and multi-syllable words are even more overwhelming.
Right.
But you have to be okay with actually naming it and saying, we wish that we could reverse this, but this is beyond the point of reversal.
Yeah.
And if we don't tell you this, we can't help you make decisions that would honor who he is as a person at this point.
Yeah.
And that would be like a family meeting for somebody who's in the ICU on a ventilator who can't participate.
Right.
But just naming it and then holding your center. So much of it is holding your center. And I try to tell when the residents are trying and they're fumbling and I'm sitting there watching, and I have to take them to the point where they can go no further because they have to learn. Mm-hmm. But then I come in, and when we debrief it, I will ask them, what was going on inside you? Mm-hmm. How did it feel to be in that room in your body? Because I also I visualize like an anchor in me holding me down. So I'm not going all over the place and flailing when everyone else in the room might be.
That right there is, I think, a great tool for all of us. Like, let's say you have to have a hard conversation with somebody. These are hard, obviously,
yes.
like the hardest conversations, but like visualizing an anchor where you're like, okay, I want to be centered.
Yes.
For this very important,
exactly.
Experience that I'm going to have. I think that's a beautiful tool.
I love anchors also, just
yes.
like,
yeah.
I don't know why. I've always been like weirdly obsessed with anchors as a tool, but they're a beautiful instrument.
Yes.
And just like envisioning them like in the deep.
Definitely.
You don't see them, but they're doing a lot of work. And so I think it's like an obsession with anchors and like a flailing sea. I don't know why, but it's always been like
I think it's awesome.
An image that comes to me. And so I tell myself, you don't know what you're walking into. The weather can change like that. Right. Just remember the anchor. Just go. And I will, in a meeting when if shit's hitting the fan, I go back to that anchor. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this person's beef is with that person, and I will never know. But how are we going to get through this meeting?
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I've got a little side story about this because please, I remember when this was before I was writing my book, and I just felt like everything was just chaos around me in my life. Yes. And it was just, I don't know, I couldn't. And I said to my really good friend, Monique, I was like, Monique, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I feel like I'm navigating this massive like tanker.
Yeah.
But it's through the dark. And I have nowhere, I feel like I've got like a lot that I need to navigate. I'm the captain, but I have like, I know where I'm going. She said, anchor down, Robin. That was her suggestion. I was like, why didn't I think of that? I just need to anchor. Like, don't go anywhere. Just
like in the storm, in the dark, with no crew and no compass. Wasn't that, like, you're just like, I don't fucking...
Same thing. Sorry. Exactly. I don't know.
I do curse a lot.
Me too. It's okay. So is there such a thing as end-of-life clarity? And what can a terminal diagnosis give you that nothing else can?
What a great question. Allow me a moment, because it's just such it cuts to the heart of everything, really. I think I'm going to answer it two ways. All of us hope that when the stakes couldn't be higher, our priorities become clear. It's almost like something I'll tell myself, like when I get really sick, I'm just going to quit medicine and write full time, right? Or something along those lines.
Is that what you tell yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, Sunita.
But also at the same time, I know that I couldn't actually leave medicine because it gives me so much.
Yeah, and it's giving your patients so much.
It's just, there's a big purpose there. Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm actually trying to tell myself is I can be free to do whatever I want, not on someone else's schedule. Or not responding just to the needs of others, but being forced to think about what I want or what are my needs. And so there is that clarity that I imagine for myself that I think a lot of us imagine, right? Like, if I got sick, I'll finally confess my love to so-and-so, or anything along those lines. Like, I will look for the life I actually want to lead. And sometimes the clarity is that we hope for is I will finally see the ways I was wrong, or I will become the person that I wish I could have been, but all these other things were weighing me down. And sometimes that never comes. And that's the other side of it, that we have, again, these fantasies about what the end of life, what finally facing our mortal end is going to force us to see, or who it's going to force us to be.
Right.
But that doesn't always pan out. But it's a useful exercise, because if we think to ourselves, if this were upon me, I would finally do X, Y, Z. What we're really saying is, I would be free to do blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then where is the freedom now? Is the way to access that freedom now. And it doesn't have to be turning your life upside down. It could be the freedom and the clarity to just do one thing differently, to make one change that would make you happier or more content or joyful. And I do think I have seen people at the very end, or towards the very end, or when confronting uncertainty, they do find that they have been doing things in a way that they wish they hadn't. And they do still have time to do it differently.
Like, I wonder about the man that you had talked about earlier, right? He's in his 30s, he's got a terminal diagnosis, and he's afraid to talk to the people around him about what he really wants and how he's feeling. And so I don't imagine that that's something that is a new pattern for him, not being able to speak and say, this is actually what's my truth.
Yes.
You know, so maybe that was some clarity that he was gifted. And that in itself is a big thing.
That is such
being able to
awesome
speak
point.
Your truth, right?
Yes.
Even if it is only for the rest of the life you have.
Yeah. But what you said about this is not like the first time he's probably felt this way is so true. Because I think how we've lived is how we die. We die as we've lived.
We die as we've lived. Can you please talk about that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So in this specific instance, it came to mind because when you said this is probably not the first time he's felt that way, those dynamics that he's been living in are the dynamics he's dying in.
Right.
And so not being able to speak, you're absolutely right. He was someone that put everyone else's feelings above his own, so much so that he didn't know what he was feeling. Like, he asked me, is it okay to you're asking me how I'm doing, and I don't feel anything sometimes. Like, he was just very numb.
Right.
And that was why it was easy to do whatever he felt was going to protect his family. And so in that way, that dynamic continued to play out until one day he actually told his wife what he wanted. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I was there the next morning, and they decided to go home on hospice.
Wow.
And he was not devastated by chemo. He was in shape enough to actually have some meaningful time.
Yeah.
But this idea that we die as we've lived, we don't always undergo these huge transformations, which is, again, I think another almost deathbed fantasy of, now I've seen the light, now I'm going to be different, here's my wisdom to bestow. When transformation like that is not always a sudden thing.
Transformation often happens so slowly, right? And it's a lifetime of transformation. It doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it can, but that's such a good point. You know, this makes me think of when my dad passed away suddenly. He died in October, not this last October, but the month of October. And August was the last time that I was sitting in front of my dad, having a conversation face to face. He was good. This was our last in-person conversation. And he said, you know what, Robin? I've had a great life. And he was just so nonchalant about it. And you know what? If I was to die tomorrow, I'd die a happy man. And I'm like, Dad, can we not have this conversation right now?
Yeah.
We are just this is a beautiful summer night. And I really don't want to talk, because my twin had died 2 years before that, very suddenly.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, and he's like, and I want you to be the executor of my will. And he was talking to me as if he was going to die tomorrow, right? He really was very matter of fact about it all. He's like, but don't you worry. You know that I've done it all. And he was just saying how he was so content in the life that he had lived. Yeah. He really was the man that just, whatever he wanted to do, he did it. You know, he didn't look back, and he just was such a great example in how to live fully.
Yes.
Have the conversations, live the life, be bold, be courageous, all the things. And when he died, it was very sudden, but that conversation and the way he lived his life up to that point, as much as I grieve my dad because I love him so much, and I miss him, having these face-to-face conversations, I know he lived his life to the fullest of how he wanted to live his life.
Yep.
He wasn't a man with regrets. He wasn't, so yeah, that makes sense to me. That sentiment of how we die as we, I don't know, it just made me think of him.
Yeah. And what a gift that he said those things to you.
Yes.
Because I think this is another thing, the intersection between love and loss, right? Embedded within each love is loss. Mm-hmm. It's the sharp side of loving somebody.
Yes.
And when somebody can tell you, this is what I hope for from you when I get sick, that is, I think, such an intimate conversation that it is rooted in deep love. And so when my patients or their families or my colleagues are afraid to bring these things up with people, I try to reframe it as an act of deep love and respect.
Wow. So what you're saying is like when they're having these conversations, how important they are.
And that there's nothing more intimate, I think, than telling somebody what you hope for yourself so that will soften the loss in some way, that they're not left guessing.
Right.
I think I'm always afraid of giving absolutes because I've learned so much about nuance in my field. Sometimes, even when somebody may want something, we are not always able to honor it for reasons that are out of our control. Somebody may want to be on life support for a long time, but the doctor might say, we are only extending death. We are not extending life. And then you reconsider, just as an example. But the intimacy of being so close to somebody that you're asking them what they would want when their heart stops. I've been in the room when people have died so many times.
Yes.
And I've been in the room when people's hearts stopped and we started CPR. And there's a real shift in energy when the soul leaves the body.
Yes.
And when we don't allow that to happen and we come in with CPR, which is important sometimes, we're interrupting something very sacred. So when we're asking someone to tell us, what would you want if this happened to you? We're asking someone to tell us what they want at the point of a huge transition. And it's just like asking somebody, how are you hoping your baby will come into this world? It's that intimate.
Right.
And when we think of it that way, not as something to push off, then this is a way we can integrate loss and death into life, because it's just as intimate as so many other things. But we're so steeped in fear that we cannot see the love. And I've always thought, and I am no expert by any means on love, but I do often think the antidote to fear is love.
You are an expert in love.
I'm definitely.
You are. You are an expert in love because you are helping people transition their lives. Like that's all about. You're right. The opposite of love is fear, but fear is getting in the way of all this love.
Yes. One of my mentors, Katie Butler, who we were just talking about, her husband had a card on their fridge that said, everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
And I really believe, I don't know who said that, but I got a copy of that card for myself and it's on my desk.
Yeah.
Because everything we fear, right? Are we going to make the right decision? Is the doctor telling us the truth? Is this person going to suffer? Am I suffering? All these fears, like if we can just look them in the eye and even feel to ourselves, I'm really scared right now, that can open the door to so much release and freedom. I don't know that freedom is about choosing an option we think will be good for us. I think the freedom is in confronting the suffering. And if I can help someone do that even a little bit, even for a flash of time, I will have done my job.
Freedom is in confronting the suffering. Wow. Can you tell me about these so many experiences that you've had when you've been there when somebody dies?
Yes.
And that you said like you feel or you're feeling the soul leave the body.
Yes.
I would love to hear.
Yeah, because not all of us can be in those rooms. And I think we're all curious, what is it like when somebody dies? And I will say, and I always couch this in that sometimes I sound a little woo-woo, but I have seen situations where people are waiting. I thought they would have died like the day before, but they're waiting for somebody to show up.
Yeah.
And then they go. I've seen people who I thought would have more time than they did, and we take them off the life support, or sometimes it's not that situation. Sometimes they're just kind of declining naturally, and they go much more quickly than I thought that they would. And I always tell people there's two timelines. There's the timeline of the physical body that I can speak about as a physician, but there is the timeline of the soul.
Yeah.
People go when they're ready. And we don't know much about that.
No.
All we can do is give them permission and to say, we're going to be okay. It's okay to go.
Yes.
And when you're in the room, when those sorts of blessings happen and people go, it is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I think people must think I'm a big fat weirdo because I like
Absolutely
being in these spaces.
not. Oh, I would find that to be very, I felt it too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because what I'm seeing is my future too.
Yes, we're all going to die.
And I'm seeing the ways that people deal with that inevitability. And it is such a gift to be let into that space and to honor it. And I think part of honoring it is noticing the love that comes in. Yeah. Sometimes people are talking to people we can't see. And if they're lucid enough to tell me who they're talking to, if they're talking to someone who's died, then I say, oh, they're here to get you.
Right.
And, or if the family's like, yeah, he's screaming at his ex-wife who died 10 years ago. I'm like, that's okay. We don't need to give medicine for that.
No.
We just need to let it happen. And that's the other thing. We jump towards medicines in medicine because we're like, number one, this is kind of how we're trained. But number two, we can't tolerate the distress.
We can't tolerate the discomfort and
we
the distress.
think that every emotion moving through somebody is something bad. And I have to remind my residents and my colleagues, this is just him being human. I had a devastating situation not long ago where a man had come to the hospital with what we thought was a stroke, but it was actually cancer in his brain that had started bleeding. And so he and his wife got hit with a new cancer diagnosis, and he can't move his right side. And when I went to see him, he opened his eyes and he just started screaming, no more. And he couldn't really enunciate, but that was definitely what he was saying. And I was just looking at him thinking, wow, I totally get it.
Yes.
And his wife was obviously scared and wanted him to calm down. And I said to her, I was like, what if we let him scream? What if we just let him scream?
Yes.
It wasn't so loud that it would wake up the whole ward, but, I just said, this is something he's trying to move through him. We should just let it move through him. So I said to him, you keep screaming.
Sometimes you just have to let it, right? Yeah.
You have to just release it. And antidepressant is not the answer here. He is enraged that this is his life now.
Yes.
He is trapped and he's frightened.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know why this is happening to him. Just let him scream. I was like, you go ahead and you keep screaming. We're going to be here as you scream. And I just stayed there and he screamed. And when I talked to his wife outside, I was like, I understand why you want him to not look so demonstrably upset. But what if you just stayed with it?
Wow.
What if you just do that for both of your sakes?
Yes.
And it was, again, this has taken time for me to see it that way, because this is not how we are trained.
No.
But I think also reflecting back on one's own life, like when did I need to scream instead of go do something that was just trying to distract myself from it? I think you learn as you live and as you see these situations unfold, the range of human emotions there is, just like there is in life. It's all the same. It's just showing up differently, but let it show up.
Wow.
Like let the ghosts come.
Yes.
face the fear. And it's not easy. I might be making it sound like, oh yeah, just do it. Like it's not, this is not easy stuff. But what I have come to see is that when you just let the hard stuff show up, it actually becomes lighter to carry for everybody because you're there together, carrying it together. And that's a lot of what I think I end up having to do is help people find a way to carry what they thought they couldn't.
Wow. Helping people carry what they thought they couldn't. Oh, wow. So you doing this for a living, have you had conversations with your parents, your brother, your loved ones around your wishes?
Yes.
I think I think this conversation to me is like, we all have to have these conversations.
Yes.
We're all going to die. And, my dad had that conversation with me. Like, he didn't want to suffer. He's like, just, hey, if there's anything, take me off life support. He was just so clear. And we were like, okay, because he was just so clear about it that we knew. And he didn't, his death he was on life support, but we knew that was it,
Even though I know what my parents want, it's very hard for me to imagine what it's going to be like. And I know I will have to face what everyone I'm taking care of is facing. Yeah. And so, but I know in my heart that I would need to do what they wanted, that this is a way I would also help. Like a term I like to use is midwife people to the next plane of existence, wherever they're supposed to go next. And I know that I would never lose them.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's also a more expansive way of looking at loss, that what remains is often much bigger than what is taken away.
Isn't that
like I am literally formed of them. So how could I ever really lose them?
No, you'll never.
But it's not easy.
No.
And I think because I have seen the things that are the most devastating or the things that people regret, I learn from that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sunita, we had, our producer, her best friend's mom has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so she reached out to her friend, and her friend had some questions to ask you.
Yeah, please.
So I'm going to read them. I keep wondering what it's going to feel like. How will my identity change when I lose a parent? And then we're just talking about this right now, aren't we? Will I have done enough anticipatory processing that it won't hurt as bad? It's almost like preparing ourselves for something, but I think please answer, because I have my thoughts around this. But
yeah, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well. I mean, we're all going to walk this path. I think the first thing I want to normalize is that you are not alone in going through this.
No.
That everything you are asking is what many people want to know and ask, even if they're not aware that they want or need to ask that. I think a lot of what I would say in response to this question is to know, like, your identity has always been changing. This is the law of life, that as people have stepped in and out of our lives, who we are has always changed. When we lose a parent, that's a really big type of transformation. But I want to kind of have you think expansively about what losing them means. We will lose them physically. But what do we cultivate now that will transcend the physical loss? What does it mean to be close to your parent in a way that you might have been afraid to before? Like, just for myself, I noticed that I am much more physical with my parents now. I'm always a huggy type, but I want to actually linger a second longer and hear my mom breathe, right? I want to be in a space that only the promise of loss can help me go into with my fullest self. And I think that part of what we ask when we ask these questions is a type of certainty. Who will I be on the other side of this? How will I survive it? And the truth is that we don't know. But we have to live our way into the answer. There's a beautiful poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, who's a poet I absolutely adore. And I'm going to ruin the poem if I try to quote it, but I would ask her to look up, live your way into the answers. And Rilke, which is spelled Rilke, find that poem, because that has given me a lot of direction when I'm asking these questions. There's nothing more human to that than to ask, how will I bear the unbearable? Who will I be on the other side of this devastation? But who you're going to be is going to be a constant revisiting of that devastation.
Yes.
That we develop a relationship to something we think we cannot live with throughout. But be in that space, really be with it, ask these questions, and be with it in an embodied way. Find out, where is that fear living in your body, and what can you do to soothe it so you can be present now.
Wow.
I hold a lot of emotions right over my heart.
Yeah.
Like everything. And so when I am devastated or overwhelmed or even joyful, I put my hand over my heart and I press it in. So I tell myself, I'm not alone in this. I am here with me through this.
Yes.
What can you do to find where that pain lives? And offer a practice of soothing yourself.
Wow.
I hope that helps.
Yeah.
I think
obviously it helped me. And so I really hope it helps her too. It makes me think of, like I've talked about my dad and when he passed, and the same thing with my twin brother. I loved them so deeply, and they were such an important part of my life. And now that they're not here in the physical, they're even more with me now that they're in spirit. And I've taken on more of them in myself.
Yes.
Like their gifts, their talents, their kind of their funny ways of looking at life. It's like they're coming in as like showing me my life, like I'm living the life physically, but it's through their eyes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, my dad, or somebody will say, your dad just said that. I'm like, I know, I channeled it. I don't know where it came from. Yeah. And so it's like this, and that's the beauty, that we see and experience when our loved ones pass.
Exactly.
But for now, what you said about being with your loved one now.
Yeah.
Being present and
Physically,
lingering longer.
Lingering.
Like listening to your mom's breath, like you said, like those moments, they mean a lot.
They really do, on both sides.
Wow.
There's a beautiful poem by Andrea Gibson, who's a poet I really
Andrea.
love.
Mm-hmm.
The sentiment of the poem is, my love, I would here with you now more than I ever was before. They wrote this kind of poem that was intended to be a poem from beyond the grave.
Yes.
And it is this idea that I'm with you now more than I ever was before.
Yeah.
And there is really something to that I don't think is a lapse into sentiment. No. The way that, some of these other ridiculous stories we tell ourselves about how we should perform a good death or participate in a good death. I think there is something to the other side, and these messages that we get and the presence that we feel that really is a reminder that nothing really ever dies.
No.
We don't ever really lose people or their essence. We lose them physically, but that's not the only way in which we know them.
That's right.
Or that they know us.
That's right. So the second question is, lately more so, what will it feel like for her, for someone like her, who has spent decades avoiding vulnerability and difficult emotions? How do they handle this? Does everything they've avoided come rushing to the surface at once? Or will she remain at peace with the same coping mechanisms of pretending everything is okay?
Yeah. So this, I think, kind of goes back to the idea of we die as we have lived.
Yes.
And what opportunity a big change offers us to look at how we've been living and to see if it's working for us in that circumstance.
Right.
I think sometimes we, again, look at things in the binaries of, will this person continue to just avoid things, or will they finally face everything? And in between those two poles is a lot of possibility.
Right.
And so in that gray area, that's what I'm curious about for this person is, what would it feel like? Like, how do you feel facing this? Can you be honest with yourself about what you're feeling right now? Where is the fear? Where is the avoidance? Where is the pining to do something differently? What are you longing for now that you're seeing that you're going to lose your parent? Like those very basic questions, I think can inform action, but giving yourself a space to really be honest about, is this something that I'm ready to approach in a different way? Is it not? Is it not for right now? Will it change? Like being open to the way things can evolve and change, I think is the most powerful thing this person can do.
Yeah.
This might be also how I'm perceived by others, that I avoid everything, and I have no idea that's how I'm perceived by others. Is it an opportunity for someone who loves her to share that with her? I'm worried that you're going to avoid facing this and that you're going to regret it, or however somebody might put it to her.
Wow.
It's an opportunity for honesty for everyone in this situation.
Like you said, there's like this open, like this right here is all potential, possibility. Wow.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. So we ask all of our guests these last two questions.
Yes.
The first is, what is one myth of love that we need to unlearn?
Oh, there's so many.
I know. You did talk about a few, and I'm like, yeah.
I think one big myth is that love is somehow something that's not already available to you. And I'll give the example of like my own life, that there were times I felt so unlovable that I thought I could only see myself as worthy of love if somebody else expressed it in a certain way. And I think what I have learned is that love was always available to me because it's the essence of who I am. And that love that is who we are is always with us. And that's where we have to begin. I used to hate it when people were like, well, you need to learn your love yourself before someone can love you. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know what that actually means.
Exactly.
But
I think I love myself, but I don't like this part or this part.
And I think it's a lot about love as just honesty and acceptance of where you are right now. And it doesn't have to come from anywhere external, but you have to actually feel it and not just think it.
Right.
And for me, when I meditate or when I'm with my dog or if I'm in a place of complete stillness and I can feel it, that current through my body that is just love, I honestly feel so powerful that this is something that's not coming from anybody else or their whims or whatever.
It's generated. It's right. You're generating it.
Exactly.
It's the flow.
Exactly. I think it's vital to our lives, but I think it shows up in all sorts of ways.
Yes. So that is the last question, is what is love?
What is love?
Yes.
That's a big question.
I know, but I think you really just talked a lot about love right there.
I mean, I think it's the essence of who we are.
Yeah.
I think it's something we have to use this life to learn about ourselves, is that we're seeking things. And this whole disclaimer for this whole interview should be like, I am not a saint or a yogi meditating in the Himalayas who has all the answers by any means, as is obvious. But this is just stuff I've come to learn honestly through going through my own suffering. Is that I was never really alone, that there was always love there, but that it's almost really hard to let it in, to really believe that you're worthy of it. But you're worthy of it simply because it's running through you.
Right.
How could you not be if it already is there?
Because the essence of who you are is love.
Exactly.
Yes. So, wow. Dr. Sunita Puri, this has been such a blessing and like just an amazing hour. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for these conversations you do, because I think even the questions you ask make me reflect on some of these things that I sometimes just blow right past because that's survival mode, but it's not reflection mode.
Wow.
And that's where the meaning is found, is in reflection.
Yeah.
So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Miriam here, senior producer for Real Love Ready. We wanted to dedicate this reading of The Good Night to Glenda Ducharme, Robin's mom, who passed away the day after this conversation was recorded.
What had I learned about death in doing this work? I'd seen that no amount of considering or preparing for it made it easy. Talking about it to prepare frightened loved ones, saying or writing goodbyes if one was lucky and lucid enough to do so, and trying to make peace with a higher power might soothe and help us. We feared it and sought to control every aspect of it, even considering physician-assisted dying to give us a sense of agency over an unconquerable aspect of human existence. But if death was not only a medical fact, but a spiritual and sacred passage, then it would always have a certain mystery that was perhaps worth accepting rather than attempting to control. Because we can't control it. We can't fully anticipate or prepare for it. What we define as a good death may not be in the cards for us, but we can use the inevitability of death to live differently. Maybe we need the promise of death to guard against taking life for granted. What if I regarded my own death with reverence instead of fear, I wondered? Or even more radically, what if I had some sort of gratitude for the transience of my life? Would it change what I worried and cared about? Wasn't it necessary to think about this when I was in the midst of building a life? Or rather, living my life? And the more I thought about mortality and what it had come to mean to others, and what I thought it meant to me, I realized that life was simultaneously so vast and so small. It was daybreak after a good sleep and exhaustion as the stars emerged. It was the first bite of an apple, the taste of butter on toast. It was the way a tree's shadow moved along the wall of a room as the afternoon passed. It was the smell of a baby's skin, the feeling of a heart fluttering with anticipation or nerves. It was the steady rhythm of a lover's breathing during sleep. It was both solitude in a wide green field and the crowding together of bodies in a church. It was equally common and singular, a shared tumult and a shared peace. It was the many things I'd ignored or half appreciated as I chased the bigger things. It was infinity in a seashell. I thought and thought that night, making mint tea and taking a few sips, watching the steam rise from the cup and then disappear. It felt strangely calming to focus on the cooling of the heat, to appreciate the fact of temporary warmth. Maybe this too was the lesson of mortality, appreciating what we have now in the midst of life, knowing that it is all a temporary gift. That night was the beginning of a conversation I continue to have with myself, especially in the moments when the wrong parts of my life feel big and cast shadows over the smaller things. Those are the times I return to my copy of the Gita, having stumbled across a passage that perfectly captured how the fact of death has taught me to live differently. No matter how strongly you ascribe to the universal delusion that you can avoid pain and have only pleasure in this life, sooner or later you must confront the fact of your inevitable aging and eventual death. Therefore, because death stirs people to seek answers to important spiritual questions, it becomes the greatest servant of humanity rather than its most feared enemy. And there it was. The life lesson and the death lesson, vast and small, interlinked, infinity in a seashell.
Wow, infinity in a seashell. Oh. Follow us at Real Love Ready and at Soul Print Media Co. on social media and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Real Love Ready series is a Soul Print Media production, presented by BetterHelp, hosted by me, Robin Ducharme. Executive producers are Robin Ducharme, John Kim, Tara Malhotra Feinberg, Hilary Swanson. Produced by Miriam Debbie Talbot. Tara Malhotra Feinberg. Directed by Miriam Debbie Talbot. Edited by Susie Landers O'Connell.